the province did a good job of labeling the bill so that it was that the title is what it's about. And Midtown and the others are places to grow so that our traditional neighborhoods can be treated as stable, established areas where growth is not directed. And similarly, if we want to stop sprawl and all and save farmland, there have to be places to grow instead of farmland. And this is even, and perhaps most starkly true, when we come to proposals such as the proposal to overdevelop Glen Abbey and put 3,000 units on this cultural heritage landscape and turn it into a growth node. If we don't have places to grow, then we'll wind up with growth where we don't want it. So I hope I made the point about Glen Abbey before I got walked on there. And there's Kurt Benson now. I said before you signed on, I'm pretty sure you didn't hear me say, that we do our municipal official plan reviews in concert with each other, the local and the regional, because they're supposed to fit together like this. And you won't be surprised that I said in my best cheeky way, and the best chance we have of getting you to conform down to us is to work with you while you're doing yours, because it's hard to change things after people make up their mind. So that's why it's a cooperative process. And my friends, I say that without any fear of offense to Kurt, because he's been terrific to work with through this entire process, and he really gets the intentions and the desires of the four local municipalities in Halton. Where we're at on the region's official plan review, Kurt will update you now, and then Geoff will talk about ours. So go ahead, Geoff.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think my screen is now shared. So, really, I don't have anything new to say after what the mayor has talked about and what Kurt Benson has talked about. So I get to just reinforce a lot of what they've been saying, and then maybe help digest some of the stuff that has been brought forward. So this is a phrase I'm going to start with, and I'm going to say Oakville is growing and continues to grow. And what's interesting about this phrase is that my girls at my house, I have 3 young girls, 7, 5, and 3, and they repeat this phrase quite often because I dabble a little bit in video making and sometimes some of these educational videos, and they love for me to replay all the little bits I've created. And this is one of the phrases that was in one of those clips. And so then they talk about all the time, and they're like, Oakville is growing and continues to grow. And it's good when they say that because it reminds me that it's true, right? I think there's a tendency to think that once a community is built, it doesn't change. It stays the way it is and doesn't change. And I don't think that's really true. And so this is I want to show you this little animation that I find quite interesting. And it's one of our GIS technicians put this together a few years ago. And what it is, it's an illustration of all the residential subdivisions in Oakville showing up on the year that they were registered. And so what I think it shows very quickly is that, so this will actually start in 1850, but since about 1945 or the end of World War II, subdivisions really started to be added to Oakville, and that's how Oakville expanded. Now, I think the important part here is to think about the white area that you see here. It shows the existing road network from today of Oakville, but really think about what was that land before these subdivisions came in. And I would argue it's a lot of natural area, a lot of agricultural fields that we've been expanding onto. So just keep that in mind, because I think that helps feed into the conversation a little bit later. Oops, let me go back and see if I can get this playing here. So you can see here, it's pretty, it hasn't changed much, in the late 1800s, starting with downtown Oakville. And you can see the years tick by, and I think in the early 1900s, there were a few, subdivisions that got registered right around here. But for the most part, there hasn't been too much. But then if you watch and pay attention to about 1945, right after World War II, you can see things really start to change. And here we go. So you can see a lot of, residential subdivisions were added, spreading out along the lake, and then starting to creep, north of what is now the QEW into the 80s and 90s, and all the way up to 2000. And then this illustration stops at 2017. And you can see up there, in North Oakville, north of Dundas. And if this were to continue, and if we, updated this, we'd start to see, more residential subdivisions up here in North Oakville. And you can see that we've been expanding out. And I would say that, probably within the next decade or so, we're going to essentially reach our boundaries, right, that we've been talking about. This is the traditional way Oakville has grown and accommodated growth, is by expanding, or sprawling, if you will, out. And I think we're coming to a point where we need to, maybe there's a time to shift the way we think about how we accommodate growth. So what I'm showing here is more of, this isn't, we haven't been doing this by ourselves. All our neighbors have been doing this as well. Whether it's Mississauga, Burlington, Milton, they've all been growing too. So I borrowed this image. This is the settlement areas map from the region, which shows in orange the built up area, which is really about, what was built up around 2006, 2007, somewhere in there. And you can see those orange areas. And then the purple areas are what was approved the last time the region did a regional official plan review. So those are basically areas that have been designated for new residential subdivisions. And you can see, as Kurt was saying, Burlington and Oakville, we've hit our limits. And Milton, is getting there. They're a little bit behind us, I would say. They've got to grow out and meet their boundaries. And then Georgetown and Halton Hills, the same way. But we just can't now spill over the borders of Oakville and continue growing like we did in order to accommodate more people. I would say something needs to change. And so part of it is we've been talking about, we need to protect our natural areas, we need to protect agriculture. And I think these are great things. And I mean, that's part of what the Greenbelt plan is all about at the provincial level. And so when you put this green overlay on, you can see that, now we're really hitting up against these boundaries that we have. But you can see these, the lighter colored areas, those are where Kurt was talking about. That's where choices need to be made about what to do with those lands. Do we continue to expand, add subdivisions, residential subdivisions, like I think we've all done in the past, or do we need to do something different? Because we know that comes at a trade-off, right, for agricultural lands, and we want to protect, there's a lot of voices saying, hey, let's protect those agricultural lands that we have, because we've lost so many already. So this is just another way of showing what Kurt was talking about. The province has said, okay, Halton, you need to plan for 1.1 million people, 500,000 jobs. And so the regional official plan, as Kurt was saying, is to figure out, okay, where are we going to put all those people in the future from here, going from here. So now coming back to the town's perspective, as the mayor's been saying, what we've done, we've done a lot of work at the town level to figure out, okay, where can we find places to grow? Because quite frankly, we can't grow outward anymore like we have been. We need to find new places to grow. And so what this here is Oakville's urban structure. It was adopted by council through official plan amendment 15. And it's really based on, so if we can't expand out, where do you go, right? Well, I think it's up. Quite simply, you got to go up. It's up instead of out if you can't go out anymore. And so what this plan is well, where you can't go up everywhere in Oakville. We don't want that. We know very well that as Oakville residents, we love what Oakville is today, right? We love our established, mature neighborhoods. We love our natural areas. We love our natural features. We love our parks. So if we want to protect those and not grow onto those by just expanding more, well, then we need to go up. We just don't really have an option. And I think that's part of the question that's happening at the regional level too, is right, do we continue to expand out, or do we now focus on going up, that intensification that Kurt was talking about? So this is a structure based on the idea of nodes and corridors. We have, where's the right places to go up? Well, you can't just go up and then still build, and build it in a way that everybody needs a car to drive. Because when you add more people, as we all know, that means more cars on the road if that's the only way that you can get around. And quite, I would say, studies, you know, our transportation studies show that everybody chooses to drive a car for, you know, over 90% of the places, you know, times that they want to go somewhere. So we need to not only go up, but we need to put those in places where people will choose not to drive as much. That's an important part of addressing climate change as well, but it's also addressing, you know, traffic congestion. We don't want to be fully congested on our roads either. So that's what this is the nodes and corridors, because then you can put that growth in places that can support really good transit. It can support really good ways to walk and bike. But it's also about mixing uses and building compactly, because then you don't need to travel as far to get to things, right? So it's traditionally we have our houses here, our, you know, our stores over here, our offices over here, and you got to drive to get to all of them. Well, let's try to mix them together better and create these places where you don't need to drive as much. And so that's what this urban structure is all about. Well, what does that look like? And so I borrowed this image actually from the region. It was in their the regional urban structure discussion paper, and I really like it because it starts to give a three-dimensional perspective on the 2D maps that we often work with. And then, as you can see, there's a hierarchy to these areas. So urban growth centers are where the province has said this, you know, these areas, this is where most of your intensification needs to go. And then, so in Oakville, that's Midtown, right? It's around the GO station. It's on an established transit corridor already with the Lakeshore West GO line. And in fact, the Midtown GO station is the second busiest station in the entire GO network. That says something to me, right? I mean, Union Station is the only one that's busier. So that makes it a really good place to go up, in my opinion, and provide a place where people don't need to drive every time they want to go somewhere. So then we've also got these other growth nodes that the mayor was mentioning as well, right? So we've got our Bronte GO major transit station area, again, along the Lakeshore West GO line, but we've also got areas like Uptown Core at Dundas and Trafalgar. We've got the Palermo Village plan, and you know that has just recently been at council as well, and will be coming again. We've got the hospital district. So these are all, I would argue, kind of the middle ground type of strategic growth areas that are shown on this concept. And the mayor even mentioned, okay, we've got some smaller ones, right? So these little smaller nodes that are these are our main street areas, is how we refer to them, right? And those are the ones that have those shopping streets already. So it makes sense. Okay, let's put people there. You know, they've got some of that mixture of uses in the walkable streets already there. Let's put some people there as well. And all of this is predicated on a system of transit, higher order transit corridors, right? So that when you put people here, it's you need that critical mass to make transit work. You can't just, you know, if you only build a little bit and it's still not enough to really make transit viable, we're going to get, that's probably the worst case scenario, I would say, because you're going to get places where transit's not supported and we're going to have more people, but the only way to get around realistically is with a car. So what we need to do is get that critical mass into these areas. And you may remember a little while back, I wrote a discussion paper that went to council, and in it, I said, you know, we need to be all in for growth when it comes to Oakville. And I think that was met with a little bit of maybe shock by some councillors and some others, but and now my colleagues always bug me. I'm the all-in guy, right? They want to make me t-shirts that say I'm all in kind of thing. But, you know, joking aside, I still stand by that statement because we need people to make this system really work, right? You need to have the people to create the critical mass, to create these great environments that support transit, that really make it and have really good bike paths and walking, so that it's really easy for people to choose not to drive their car. And I'll get into a little bit more of that a little bit later, but that's where this urban structure that we've developed at the town is what we're using that to feed up into the region's plan. And I hope you can see some of what Kurt was showing certainly reflects this nodes and corridor idea that the town has developed. And so, like the mayor said, I think we're for the most part, you know, we're in alignment in that regard. So like I said, the town's been doing a lot of work. So I'm just going to show you a few visuals. This here is the Palermo Village demonstration plan that's town staff created. And it's a really good example of building up, building compactly, mixing uses, creating good tree-lined streets that are great for walking. You can see it's got a grocery store plan. This is ideally to be like a community center. It's got a park, it's a transit center to help with that. And then, this is a mixture of office and residential in here, as well as some ground-oriented housing to really get a mix and create a complete community. And that's what we're really trying to do in all of these growth areas, is create a complete community. Another way of looking at it is that 15-minute neighborhood, right? Where you can basically walk to most everything that you want to do in your day without having to get into a car necessarily. So this one is another demonstration plan for the Bronte Go MTSA, the major transit station area. This was prepared by our consultants. And again, this is a little bit different because there's an existing employment. So this one would have, I think, a higher employment character to it. But it's the idea of whether it's people or jobs, let's concentrate them around transit stations to really create, again, that walkable environment where people can work and live close to transit. And you can see here, again, it's about going up, right? It's about getting some of that height in there, because that's how you make more efficient use of the land, and you can accommodate more people on less land than we have before. Just another demonstration plan done by our consultants. This one's for the hospital district. And again, you can see some of the same principles going in, right? It's about creating really good design at the base, right? Really attractive environments to be when you're in the street and in the public realm, but there's height involved, right? You need to go up, because that gives you the opportunity to build the stuff at the ground level that you need. And then if you go up, in our existing built areas, that's when it has a ramification out in places like Milton and Halton Hills, where if we can accommodate people within Oakville, within built up areas in Burlington and in Milton, you don't need to continue to expand, right? It requires a shift. It's going to be, we're probably looking at housing people more in apartment style housing. But even that is evolving and changing. It's not like, we remember apartments being back in the 1960s. I think design has come a long way in the last, 60 or 70 years that we're talking about. So maybe you remember me presenting just a couple of weeks ago at Planning and Development Council about Midtown. And so these are some of the images that were included in that presentation. And this one really focuses in on the importance of designing the public realm, right? It's how those buildings meet the street that are extremely important. How do you build those spaces in between, right? How do you provide a nice place to be, a nice place to walk, to ride your bike, those type of things, so that it becomes a community that you want to live in, right? It's not just a tower in the park idea that may have been, purported a number of decades ago. So in Midtown, we're really focusing in on the design, right? The devil's always in the details, but it's about height, right? You may have heard at that meeting that a developer came in and said, I really think 45 to 50 stories is appropriate in this location. And so, when we're talking regional level, I hear a lot of things about, hey, we got to protect our natural areas. We got to protect our agricultural land. And, and climate change is really important. And it is, but, but I find it, I personally, and I'll be a little bit honest here, is that I find it disheartening when I go and I present plans for Midtown, which this is where most of our intensification is supposed to come. And I met with resistance to height, right? Like, oh, 20 stories, that's really high. And it's tough, because we need to have some of that height, and that density in order to achieve some of the things that we want to protect. If we want to protect our mature neighborhoods from development pressures, well, we got to find places to grow that allow that to happen, and we enable that and encourage it to happen. And our urban growth center would be, the most important piece of that puzzle to allow that to happen. So I'm actually inclined to agree with, a developer who says, yeah, we need 45, 50-story buildings, because if you think about what we've already got in Oakville, there are actually quite a number of 20-story buildings that we've already got. We've got some in Kerr Village. We've got some down near Bronte Village along Marine Drive. You think about Trafalgar Road, there's 15 stories, there's 20 stories, even up in behind Town Hall, for example. And we've got a 25-story, tower going up in Uptown. So if that's what we've already got, and Midtown is supposed to be the place where we actually even add more growth, doesn't it make sense that we should be even higher than what we've already done, and that we should allow those taller buildings to happen? Because there's a number of things that happen when you allow things to go higher. There may be more opportunity for developers to then invest in stuff at the ground level. Say, for example, this linear park that you see here that we're showing as an idea, and to maybe provide, rooftop amenity areas, right? So when I think about, I have a young family, and if I was going to have my family live in say in Midtown, I'd want to make sure that whatever building I was in, I had opportunities to get my kids outside, whether it's a public park or a plaza, but even within the development itself. And I think by allowing height, you can start to ask for some of those things, those really good amenity areas that you might start to get. And you can see some of those, they're showing, up here on top of some of these buildings. But then you get, all the things that you need mixed in a really good environment. And I could talk about that for a long time, but I'll move on. But I think it's really important to, I guess, not necessarily be afraid of height, because I think it gets us a lot of the really good things that we want as well. So now, if you permit me, I'm gonna kind of transport you out of even Ontario for a second and bring you back to my hometown. And this here is Edmonton. My hometown is Edmonton, and this is the neighborhood I lived in. And right in that little dot, that's where I used to live. So I lived in a 10-story building. I had 1,100 square feet, 2-bedroom apartment on the top floor. And what I really loved about this place is that everything was close by, right? So I worked down over here at this building. So it was a 20-minute walk. It was a great way to get out. 20 minutes of walking was fabulous. I could bike it quicker, but walking was what I choose to do. There's a grocery store right here. There's another grocery store over here. My doctor's office was over here. There's coffee shops down here along this street that I will show you in a sec. And this road here, this is Jasper Avenue, which runs into the main downtown core. But this was great because I could just walk out. It was 2 minutes to get to the end of the block, and I never had to wait more than 5 minutes, and I could catch a bus to wherever I wanted to go, right? It would bring me directly in and connect me with everywhere else. There was even an LRT, and you can see the LRT crosses the river here and heads underground. So there was an underground station over here. That was a 10-minute walk for me to get into that. That would bring me across the river into the university area where I had other friends. It was great. And if you notice here, there's a lot of, I think Edmonton was really good about street trees, right? And which I think Oakville is great at as well. And it's a very important part of any of our growth areas. And you can see the tree-lined streets that are happening in here. There was there's a little park. What was great is that we could walk, my wife and I, we could walk. There was a farmer's market every weekend on one of the streets over here. And it's great. Like I always joke that in my childhood in Edmonton, a river always runs through it. And the river valley was a great amenity. And I think about this, I mention it because Midtown has 16 Mile Creek quite close to it. Palermo has Brawny Creek, so there's some natural features that really tie in. And if you have that proximity, they really help create a great place to live. So now I'll just bring you right down to street level. This here was the building I lived in. And this street, I wouldn't say, it's fabulous design or anything, but it's very simple, right? It's got sidewalks, it has trees. And what I want to emphasize is that for me, it didn't matter what the height of the building was when I was walking there. I was just more interested in what was happening down at street level, whether my building was 10 stories, 15 stories, or 20 stories. And there were those heights mixed in this neighborhood all over the place. It didn't really matter because the streets were really good and really comfortable and a great place to be. So this is just looking the other way. Again, here's my building. But here's something that's really interesting. And most people don't notice this, but you can see this level here. This is actually offices right within my 10-story building. So it was a mixture of uses right here. Across the street, this was probably a 15-story building. It had a pub in the bottom. It had some legal offices. It had, a hair salon, right? But all mixed right within the street. And another piece that I really enjoy about Edmonton is that on-street parking is part of that design, right? It's about it creates a buffer, but it also provides parking supply. Parking is a big issue these days in Oakville. And I think there's a lot of space on our streets that we could utilize. There was also parking under my building and things like that too. But for me, it was just, it was a neighborhood of height that I really enjoyed. So other pieces of it, so this was my walk to work. I'd come and there were places where you could cut through where cars couldn't get. So this is what we're thinking for Midtown as well, right? You've got great places to walk, to bike. And I hear that from the, from the comments that are coming in from the community is that, hey, this is hugely important. And I wholeheartedly agree. So when you think about that linear park, this is an example of another street that I would walk down on my way to work. And you can see, 2 sidewalks, some great tree plantings, double row of tree plantings, and you've got a great place to be. And yeah, there's some tall buildings around, but that's not what really really predominates the environment. It's really what happens at street level. So this here is the farmers market I was showing, and this is more over in the downtown core. But again, it starts to show that there's some pretty tall buildings here and built on podiums that are about 4 to 6 stories. But when you get down at street level, again, you're taking pictures and you don't even really notice this height that's right beside you. And so this was on a weekend. This would just be on a regular day. You can see this is like a quasi grocery store, restaurant combination. They've got places to sit out here. You're getting sunlight in on the street. And this was a great place. I had friends that lived on this street and they loved it. It was 2 blocks to work for them too. So I think that's another piece of it that's important to think about, is that when you create these environments, you start to attract people who want to work next to where they live, right? So that's when you start mixing uses in Midtown. Maybe people don't even travel into Toronto anymore, right? They live and work in Oakville. And I think that's part of how we accommodate the jobs that the province is looking for us to have as well. I just wanted to show you, this is where we used to go for coffee all the time. It's a 5-minute walk away. And then you can see you go down to the end of the street, and I won't belabor the point too much. We get this, wonderful vista. Again, tall buildings, but when you're down at street level, it's really not what you notice. And again, I point this out because, I think we can take advantage of 16 Mile Creek as well in Midtown and really use that as a community amenity in terms of even just passive views, for example. And then I think I show this one. This is just my wife and I walking on that promenade. And I know I've heard like the idea that, oh, if I can see it, it impacts me. Well, I would argue I can see these buildings. And for me, this is part of what I remember about being really cool about Edmonton, right? You had these great natural features. And yeah, you had these buildings popping up. I think they added to the ambiance and to the environment rather than detract. And so I just wanted to show some of these images to say, look at, I really don't fear height. In fact, there's part of me that kind of misses it. Because if you do it right and you design it right, it can be a huge asset to our community. And so maybe I'll just leave it there, but just wanted to give you a sense of kind of maybe some of my thoughts about, what the region's doing and what some of the work the town's been doing.
Thank you very much, Geoff. That was very good. I really appreciate that. The fine point I'd like to put on this is the discussion that's going on over the next months and leading up to a decision by July of 2022 is akin, it's similar to a game of Sim City for the 20 years after the next 10. So Halton and its 4 local municipalities are planned for population growth and where and how it'll happen up until 2031. We are in Oakville probably 210,000, give or take, which is approximately what the official plans of Oakville and the region from 2009 called for. And in 2031, our forecasted population is about 250,000. So the exercise we're engaged in now, and for the next year, or slightly more than a year, is Sim City for the 20 years after the next 10. The next 10 are done. They're in the can. They're locked and loaded. It's what will it be like for those 20 years after this 10? some people shrink from making a decision for other people that far into the future, but our predecessors had to make the similar kind of decisions for us. As Geoff's, the animation that he showed you of how Oakville filled out its territory. So every one of those decades that you saw, every one of those expansions happened as a result of people before that, sometimes quite a lot before that, making decisions for future people. And if you think about it, in life, we have to do that all the time. I mean, most of us have raised kids, and we make decisions when they're one that have an impact on what they're going to do when they're 30, or certainly, for the first 20 years, we, as parents, we're not afraid to look into the future and try to make a good future. And that's what we're trying to do here, is make the best possible future. So the goalpost, or the givens in the landscape, in the I'm going to call it the geopolitical landscape, in the environmental landscape, those are, what happens to climate change and greenhouse gases? What happens to farmland? Has COVID persuaded us that we don't want to be dependent upon other countries for all of our food? Do we want to continue to have farms to feed us? And then when it comes to the places that we want to preserve, like Glen Abbey, for example, and other places, because Glen Abbey's certainly not the only one, it's just the biggest one. If the basic premise of the Places to Grow statute is you must have places to grow, but you get to choose them. And we've chosen them together as a community over the last 15 years for these growth centers, these growth nodes, the growth corridors, and the Main Street areas. And I'll just correct myself. We didn't, well, actually, you know what? Oakville did choose its growth center. There's a funny story there. The province came to Oakville in 2003 when they were writing the growth plan that Places to Grow was going to impose. And they told Oakville, we're going to put your growth center, you're going to have a growth center, and it's going to be downtown Oakville. And the council of the day said, well, that's an interesting idea, but Trafalgar Road is a heritage road. It's only 2 lanes wide, and we would have to destroy all those homes and all those trees in order to get people in and out of a growth center. If you want to put 20,000 people and jobs in downtown Oakville, there's no way to get in and out of there. And so the province said, oops, all right, well, we'll put it on the Oakville GO station, which I think, I was here at the time. I was a residence leader. I was the leader of Joshua Creek, and I agreed that that made a heck of a lot more sense, the GO station area, than downtown, because I knew that all my friends in Trafalgar Chartwell did not care for the proposition that Trafalgar Road would be destroyed and turned into a boulevard. So choices about the future. And in some ways, it's very interesting for those of us who, myself, I'm a very healthy person, and I plan to live for a very long time. But these decisions about 2051, I'll be 100 in 2046. So just to give you an idea, I'm not sure I'll be here. As long-lived as I hope, as my father is and my grandfather was, 2051 is a stretch. But as you know, I'm an optimist. So, who knows? I may be here. So these are the really important things that are before us. And I've come to believe that when we look at Midtown and at the growth corridors and the growth nodes, the proper question is not, why does it have to be so high? The proper question is, what could we fit there? The spirit of my approach to growth that I've espoused for 15, well, actually for longer than I've been mayor, is that we should grow where it fits and not where it doesn't. And that premise, that one little sentence, only where it fits and not where it doesn't, that is the heart and soul of the Livable Oakville official plan that we all created together. Well, your predecessors in some cases, but we all created together between 2007 and 2009 when we threw away the old official plan and built the brand new one from the ground up that we were proud to call Livable Oakville. And every residents association came and spoke in support of it, and every member of council voted for it. And I think in the main, we're pretty proud of it. I am still anyway. So it's the future. It's in front of us. We get more than 12 months. Well, we've had 2 years already, and you have been involved for a good deal of that. But we've got a little bit more than 12 more months to go. This is when the community engagement that makes Oakville Oakville is more important than it has ever been. So please stay engaged, and let's continue to make Oakville Canada's most livable town.